I got the alleged suspect in handcuffs right now detained.
I'm not alleged. I did it. 4 words, spoken voluntarily, spoken to no one in particular, spoken by a 17-year-old boy standing in handcuffs on the track, while 40 yards away, medics were still working on the chest of Austin Medoff. The officer had just radioed dispatch. I have the alleged suspect detained. And from somewhere just off camera, a second microphone, belonging to a female officer standing nearby, picked up the correction. Quiet, certain, unprompted. I'm not alleged. I did it. The defense had spent the entire trial arguing self-defense. They had built a narrative around a group attack, an outnumbered teenager, a provocation so extreme that lethal force was the only reasonable response. They had questioned the reliability of witnesses, the quality of the surveillance footage, the loyalty of everyone in that Memorial High School tent. They had constructed piece by piece an architecture of reasonable doubt. And then Karmelo Anthony dismantled it himself, in 4 words, before anyone had even asked him a question. This is the Karmelo Anthony case, and this is what the evidence actually shows.
It was the trial and verdict that divided the community, a case where different people looked at the same evidence and came to different conclusions.
Free Carmelo! Free Carmelo!
Austin Metcalf was a high school athlete at a track meet, sitting under his Memorial High School tent with his twin brother and teammates. Karmelo Anthony was a student athlete from a different high school who went under that Memorial High School tent and was asked to leave. That's when things escalated. Witnesses testified that Karmelo refused to leave and told Austin, "Touch me and see what happens." Austin did touch Karmelo, and what happened next ended one teenage life and has another teenager locked up in prison, convicted of murder. Witnesses described what happened, but now, for the first time, we are seeing the actual surveillance video. What does...
To understand what happened on the morning of that Texas track meet, you need to understand what kind of case this was before a single word of testimony was ever delivered. This was a closed trial. Cameras out, microphones out. In a high-profile, community-dividing murder case involving 2 teenage athletes, the judge made the decision to seal the proceedings from public view. No footage, no audio, nothing that would allow the people most affected by this verdict, the community that would have to live with it, to evaluate the evidence for themselves.
This is a trial the public did not see. Cameras and microphones kept out of the courtroom, so we never got to hear the testimony of the witnesses. But now, the evidence which had been sealed has been unsealed, and we're going to take a look at it with Cody Thomas, who was in...
What followed was predictable, because it is always predictable. A verdict landed in a vacuum. One side celebrated, the other side questioned everything. And the public, having seen none of the testimony and heard none of the evidence, began debating the case on the basis of secondhand accounts, social media summaries, and the competing narratives of people who were either deeply invested in one outcome or had never set foot in the courtroom. The noise was enormous. The information was almost entirely unreliable. There is a legal concept for that kind of second and third-hand information. It is called hearsay. Hearsay is generally inadmissible in a court of law precisely because it is not reliable. Because the further a statement travels from its original source, the more it distorts. The irony of a sealed trial is that it forces the very public the court is supposed to serve to evaluate a verdict using exactly the kind of evidence the court itself would never allow inside the room. A community was asked to trust a process it was specifically excluded from witnessing. That exclusion matters. It matters because trust in a legal system is not built by correct verdicts alone. It is built by visible process. When a community cannot see how a conclusion was reached, the conclusion itself becomes suspect, not because of what the evidence shows, but because no one was permitted to see the evidence at all.
But the results have put us in a place where there is a sense of a mistrust of the system. And I knew this would happen. It always happens. In a case like this, if you don't allow the public to see it, the public to hear it, one side or the other is going to lose the case.
Now, some of that evidence has been unsealed. And that is where this story begins in earnest. Austin Madoff was a high school athlete. On the morning of the incident, he was at a track meet with his twin brother and teammates, seated under the Memorial High School tent in the stadium bleachers. They had just returned from nearby. They had heard that some of their old middle school football coaches were at an adjacent school, talking to younger students, and they had gone to say hello. No history of conflict, no escalation in progress. Teenagers visiting old coaches on a Tuesday morning.
No history between these two teams. Where these boys were coming from, I guess the middle school that they went to is kind of adjacent to the high school that they were at. And the understanding, as it was explained in the courtroom, is that, this is early in the morning. This was, 10 o'clock in the morning when this all went down. They got word that some of their old coaches, the old football coaches, were at this middle school, talking to the younger kids, and they wanted to go see their old.
Carmelo Anthony arrived at the same stadium from a different school. His own school's tent had not yet arrived. It was coming on a second bus. He and some friends had initially sheltered in a dugout adjacent to the bleachers, but a coach ran them out. So Carmelo made his way to another school's tent, the Memorial High School tent, the tent belonging to Austin Metcalf and his teammates. He was asked to leave. He refused.
Yeah, I mean, it's this tent for pretty much essentially an entire track team to be crowded under, during the rain. Of course, the rain was a big point of contention in the trial because they were trying to say, the defense was saying Carmelo was under this tent due to the rain. They mentioned that Carmelo and a couple other friends were in a dugout adjacent to the bleachers before a coach came and ran him out. And then, he comes back over here and then finds his way under this tent. But yeah, very small crowd.
What testimony established, and what witnesses described under oath, is that Carmelo told Austin Madoff, "Touch me and see what happens." Austin touched him. What happened next took approximately 36 seconds from start to finish. The surveillance footage, pixelated and wide angle, captures the entire sequence. The forensic video analyst, the very first witness called in the entire trial, walked the jury through it frame by frame, slowed down, zoomed in, wide angle, from multiple camera positions.
The video here was shown, of course, during the forensic video analyst testimony, the very first witness called in the whole trial, pretty much for the analyst to talk about how we identify who is in, the later video when the moment happens. So this is one of those earlier videos like, hey, this is what he has on, black top, black shorts. These shoes, they zoomed in on the shoes. I think they were New Balance, some, distinguishable colored shoes. But that is the context of what that specific clip was for them coming into the gate. Kind of just a identifier type of deal.
A scene setter. And
yeah.
The jury saw it on a large screen positioned directly adjacent to the jury box. They saw everything the footage could offer.
Just tell us, how is this shown to the jury? Is this shown to the jury on a big screen? Do they have little monitors in front of them? What was the setup in the courtroom for this jury?
So
this video?
it was a decently sized screen. It looked like what, maybe a big screen television. So that's what the jury was looking at. And then, of course, us in the gallery, there were two kind of normal sized flat screens on either side of the gallery for us to see it. So it was still, and I was at the back of the courtroom. So I could see what was going on, but I didn't have my glasses in the courtroom, so I still was squinting really hard. But the jury had a big screen TV that was kind of directly adjacent to the jury box. So they got a decent view at this video, which, again, as I was describing, weeks ago, that it's not the best quality, but it sets the scene as to what is going on.
And how much did the jury see of this video? Did they see it zoomed in? Did they see it slowed down? Did they see it frame by frame? How was it presented to the jury as we get ready to show it to the viewers here?
All of those things. So the forensic video analyst set the scene like, hey, this is where we are. This is, the full context of the video. You see where it looks better quality because it's what it's supposed to be and the resolution that it's supposed to be. Then we saw those clips that we just showed, the identifiers from the other angles of different cameras around the stadium. So again, scene setters, individual A, individual B, Austin, Carmelo. And then you saw the zoom in. Here's the tent. Here's what's going on. The video we just showed, Carmelo coming out of the underside of that side of the bleachers. This is him. So you saw all of that before we got to the zoomed in tent. And so, of course, we're about to watch the video so we can watch it and then talk about it there. But you saw it in all those zoomed in contexts. You saw the shove, or, you know, what's presumed to be the shove and everything following. But wide angle, frame by frame, slowed down. Here's Carmelo, here's Austin, zoomed in.
What the footage can offer is limited. This is important to understand. The tent is small, enough to shelter a track team, covering perhaps 2 rows of bleachers. The camera is positioned across the football field. The resolution, even zoomed and enhanced, produces what one observer in the courtroom called humanoid blobs. You can see figures, you can see movement. You cannot, with any certainty, identify who is sitting and who is standing, who approached whom, or how many people were actively involved in the confrontation. The defense relied on this ambiguity.
Okay, so we're going to show you this wide video in real time, not slowed down. It's about 36 seconds, which takes us to the moment of the stabbing, and then when Carmelo leaves. The tent is where you want to focus your attention, folks, on the tent on the left side of the screen and towards the top of the tent. So the top of the tent is there. Look just below that. That's where the action takes place. That's where the murder takes place. And then you'll see Carmelo leave towards the top. Let's take a look at that in real time right now. And everything, I mean, this is a super wide angle.
Their narrative was that Carmelo was seated when Austin and his twin brother approached him, that 2 larger athletes towered over him, that he was surrounded, that the encounter was not a one-on-one confrontation, but something closer to an assault by a group. 3 to 4 people, according to statements made by Carmelo's family in the aftermath.
Is significant, right? If you're alleging self-defense, which is what he alleged, something had to happen before the moment of the knife coming out and what the scene was like. So let's put that video up now and together take a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see once you zoom in, everything gets a little more blurry, to say the least. So what is the testimony about what's happening in the minutes leading up to this? Is everyone there? How long is Carmelo there? How long is Austin there?
So what we heard in court, because we watched it from the context of, you know, when Carmelo came out of that tunnel and when Austin was walking back from the middle school, the testimony, even the prosecutors were saying Carmelo was under this tent 2 minutes before Austin Metcalf and those boys got to the tent. About like minute 58, you know, somewhere around the 2-minute mark. Once Austin gets there, both parties are under this tent for around 4 minutes and some change. So again, a very quick altercation.
So at this point, everyone would be under the tent, right? We're doing the last.
Yes.
We're about 2 minutes and 45 seconds away.
Yes.
So
everybody would be under the tent.
Let's just freeze it for a moment there. We'll pause it for just a moment. Do we know exactly where everyone is, or do people move around?
People are, you know, obviously moving, but I'll tell you in that courtroom, Benny, there was no specific, because this is a big point of contention. Who was sitting, who was standing, who was, you know, over whoever, arguing or whatever. Nothing was specified as far as under this tent. Of course, when you see the push and all the shove, that's, you know, obviously rightfully assumed to be them. But as far as right here, where you just see these humanoid blobs, nothing was really, this is this person. This person's obviously sitting. I mean, you can't really see anything, right? And, you know, the defense's narrative is that, and you've heard a bunch of the chatter online from Carmelo's parents, was that he was getting jumped, or, you know, 3 to 4 different people, right? But here, of course, you see a lot of people, but you can't make out who's standing around who's what, doing what, whatever under the tent. So nothing specified as far as...
An outnumbered teenager defending himself with the only thing he had. The prosecution told a different story. They said the video shows no such group attack in the minutes leading up to the stabbing. They noted that other people at the stadium, students walking nearby, individuals in adjacent areas, did not stop, did not react, did not register the kind of alarm that an active group assault would generate. A person standing 20 feet away, a coach from Liberty High School, turned around when he heard commotion, and was surprised to find a stabbing had occurred. He had been expecting, at most, a fight between boys. He did not see a mob. A girl from Liberty High School, an independent witness, no affiliation with Memorial, no relationship to Austin Metcalf or his teammates, was seated nearby. She heard noise but did not think much of it. She turned back to watch the track events. Moments later, she heard something that pulled her back around, and Austin Metcalf was falling down the bleachers with a wound in his chest. She testified. She cried on the stand. The proceedings had to pause for approximately 2 minutes. She had gone home afterward and talked to her mother about what she saw for days before she and her mother drove back to the police station because, as she put it, they felt it was the right thing to do.
Briscoe 911, what is the location of the emergency?
Hi, we're at Kuykendall Stadium. My friend just got stabbed.
Okay, do you know who stabbed him?
We have no clue. He was sitting in our tent, but you need to send an ambulance right now.
They're on the way, okay? Give me a description of the person that stabbed him.
He was wearing a gray Essentials hoodie. He was black. He's standing out on the track right now.
He's standing on the track?
Yeah.
Okay.
His blue sweatpants on and John.
Okay, what did he stab your friend with?
I don't know. My friend's bleeding everywhere.
Okay. Okay. Where was he stabbed at?
The chest.
Okay. And do you still see the person that stabbed him, or did he leave?
It was Austin. Austin got stabbed in the chest. I'm sorry, what did you say?
The person that stabbed him, is he still there? Do you still see him?
There's adults on him, I think. Yeah.
There's adults that are trying to keep him there?
Know who he is. Sorry, what?
The person that stabbed your friend, is he still there?
Yeah, he's still here.
Okay, and
He's with the coach.
There's a coach with him?
Yes, he's with. People got him.
Okay. Do you know if he still has the weapon on him?
No clue, but he's like he can't do nothing. He's done.
What do you mean?
He stabbed Austin Metcalf in the chest. What?
What do you mean he can't do anything? What's going on with him?
Coaches have him. He can't hurt anyone.
Okay, when you say they have him, are they physically holding him down?
No, they're just holding him, walking around.
Okay.
Okay.
She had nothing to gain. She had no stake in the outcome. She was simply a teenager at a track meet who saw something she was not supposed to see and could not unsee. And that is the point where the self-defense argument encounters its most significant structural problem. Not from the testimony of Austin's teammates, not from anyone who could be accused of loyalty or grief distorting their memory. The problem comes from a person with no connection to anyone involved. The problem comes from exactly the kind of witness a defense team most fears. Someone with no reason to say anything other than what they saw.
If you believe that the people under the memorial tent are all friends of Austin, they're going to say one thing: this is an independent witness, no affiliation with.
Now we need to talk about what Karmelo Anthony said, because this is the part of the case that warranted careful attention in the courtroom, and it warrants the same careful attention here. When the surveillance video ends, Karmelo runs from the tent, up 3 to 4 rows of bleachers. A student on the scene tells an officer, "I know where the knife is. I can take you there."
That's where the knife gets tossed out, clearly right here. When we were in court, we saw the body cam of the officer who discovered the knife, who looked down and said, "Oh, here it is. There's still blood and bone matter on it." That's what he said on the body cam. We saw a couple of blood spots when they showed the evidence. We didn't see any bone matter, but again, it was raining that day. It could have, got rinsed off, or as the chain of evidence went around, that stuff could have fallen off. But he said that on the body cam. And the way they found the knife was there was another student who also testified that ran up, and you heard him on audio on the body cam of this guy talking about the bone matter. He comes up and he's like, "I know where the knife is." There's a coach that brings him up. "This kid knows, he saw what happened. I know where the knife is. It's up there. I can take you and show you." And the officer's like, "All right, calm down. Like, let me know where it is." But anyway, that's the knife that was 3 to 4 bleachers up from where everything went down, where we saw Carmelo run up those bleachers.
The officer finds it. Blood and bone matter on the blade. The knife itself is not a pocket knife in any casual sense of the word. It is a folding tactical blade, similar in design to the utility knives carried by law enforcement officers on duty, operable with one hand, one finger. The prosecution demonstrated this in front of the jury with an officer standing beside the jury box. Not the Boy Scout knife you might carry on a camping trip. Something else entirely.
All right, let's take a look at the knife itself now.
Heavy-duty looking knife.
This is the first thing that strikes me. The way it was described, 3.5 inches, pocket knife. I'm thinking of the little red Swiss Army knife. That and that's not what this is.
No, this is definitely it's you cut something with that, you know, it's sharp. And the way this knife was brought up, not this exact knife that you see the blood to the kind of to the top left there, there's little red spots where the hinge is, that's the blood. But this knife was brought up with the testimony of an officer, just talking about it and, you know, how, quickly you can flip it out with one finger or one hand. But one of the things that was kind of loosely said, it wasn't something the prosecution really doubled down on, but as they were doing a demonstration of the knife and how it works, the officer was standing up in front of the jury box as well. And the prosecutor goes, well, this is similar to the knife that you carry when you're on duty. And the officer's like, oh yeah, you know, that's what we cut seat belts with. That's what we do all different sorts of things with, showing that this is.
After leaving the tent, Carmelo walks the track. A coach from another school approaches him. The coach testifies to what was said. Carmelo tells the coach, he put his hands on me. I told him not to. The coach says, if that kid dies, your life changes right here. And Carmelo says, he's not going to die. The coach says, that may be true, but if he does. And that is when, according to the coach's testimony, Carmelo began to cry. The realization, arriving in stages, the understanding of what a split second had actually done.
That's before he reaches the coach and, you know, people are saying, hey, they're saying this kid stabbed somebody, stop him. And, you know, then he's walking around the track with this coach and the coach is like, hey, son, what have you done? You know, a coach from a different school. They're all different kinds of coaches. And the coach is like, and he testified, what are they saying you've done? What have you done? He put his hands on me. I told him not to. And the coach is like, well, you know, if that kid dies, you know, your life changes right here. And he was like, oh, he's not going to die, which, you know, did he think he killed somebody? Obviously we stabbed him, but maybe he didn't think he killed anybody. And the coach is like, well, that may be true, but if he does die. And then that's when he said Carmelo starts to cry and everything else ensues.
Shortly after that exchange, an officer approaches. The radio crackles. I have the alleged suspect detained. And from just off camera, captured on a second body cam belonging to a female officer standing nearby, comes the response that the prosecution would carry into their closing argument.
So you didn't, in the courtroom, we're watching this body cam, right? There's another female officer off the camera, but like right there next to them. Her camera picks up, Carmelo, you heard the guy say, I have the alleged suspect. Her camera picks up the audio clear where he says, I'm not alleged, I did it.
This is the alleged suspect.
Okay. I am. No, I'm not. Well, I know how it goes. I'm not alleged, I did it.
Okay.
So we heard that in the courtroom. It's another angle of the body cam of this same moment here. She's just off the camera there. You can't see it on his body cam. That's what I was pointing at now as this was going on. You heard him say some mumbles there, but, you know, the radio is coming in with this officer. But I have the alleged suspect. Rating went, I'm not alleged.
I'm not alleged. I did it. 4 words. Unasked, uncoerced, volunteered. Not in response to a question. And this is the legal point that requires a moment of attention. There is a constitutional protection in American law called the Miranda warning. The right to remain silent, the right to an attorney, the warning that anything you say can and will be used against you. Most people know it from television. What most people do not know is precisely when it applies. Miranda warnings are required before a custodial interrogation, before law enforcement asks you questions while you are under arrest. They are not required the moment handcuffs go on. If a person in custody volunteers statements without being questioned, those statements are admissible. They do not disappear simply because the Miranda warning had not yet been delivered. The warning governs interrogation. It does not govern what you choose to say on your own.
I haven't read him his rights, by the way. They haven't read him his rights, but they're not asking him questions. So the fact that he is saying things, even though he hasn't been Mirandized, as long as it's not in response to a question or an interrogation, it's just something that he's saying, it's still admissible and can be used against you. And there might be folks who are saying, well, I didn't hear Miranda. Yeah, he wasn't Mirandized yet, but they haven't questioned him yet. He's volunteering all this information.
Mm-hmm. And that's what's happening. And, that was, some of the chatter we've seen. Why was he speaking? But of course, you have a 17-year-old kid who just stabbed somebody. He's not thinking lawfully of where my Miranda rights and all that and find me a lawyer. He's a 17-year-old kid that just did.
Carmelo Anthony had not been questioned. No one had asked him anything. He heard himself described as the alleged suspect, and he corrected the record. Voluntarily, on camera, in front of 2 officers, with a jury listening a year later in a Texas courtroom. The prosecution treated this as all but a confession to the act itself.
One final question just on this section. You mentioned the demeanor. This is after a very violent, it was quick, but very violent act, and there seems to be a level of calm. Did prosecutors comment on that at all?
They did, because as I was talking earlier, but the whimper that we heard, he was a little calm during the arrest, the initial arrest when he was on the other side of that fence. Compliant, he wasn't trying to run away. Then you heard he put his hands on me, and it's this obviously emotional voice, and then we're back to calm again. So there was that, dichotomous contrast there, and prosecutors were like, well, was that voice performative? And then you see that he's sitting here calm and collected despite, again, a 17-year-old stabbing someone. Unbeknownst to him at the time, it was to death, but you still stabbed someone. So they definitely mentioned it. It wasn't a big point they were trying to make, but it was something that they brought to people's attention, especially given you went from 15 seconds of high emotion to, oh yeah, my name's Carmelo Anthony. Here's how it's spelled. I go to Centennial High School. I'm a 12th grader.
And they were largely correct to do so. The question of whether the stabbing occurred was never seriously in dispute. What the jury had to decide was why it occurred, whether the circumstances constituted lawful self-defense or whether they constituted murder. And this is where the second thing Carmelo said on that body cam footage becomes the most quietly devastating detail in the entire evidentiary record. On the body cam, in that same halting, emotional voice, he says, I told him not to put his hands on me. Him. Singular. Not they, not them, not those guys or those kids, or any plural construction that would have been consistent with the defense narrative of a group attack by 3 to 4 individuals. The defense had spent the trial arguing that Carmelo was surrounded, outnumbered, and in fear for his life. And in the first unscripted, uncounseled, unfiltered moments after the stabbing, when there was no attorney present and no narrative to maintain, Carmelo Anthony referred to a single person.
The defense's narrative was that there was multiple kids surrounding him, but you hear him say, he put his hands on me. I told him not to, not they, put their hands on me. So, that's coming up. I don't want to spoil it or anything, but that's...
No. It's good to have a heads up as to what to listen to and what the arguments were inside the courtroom.
The prosecution held this detail. They did not use it prominently during the main phase of the trial. They saved it.
And again, that was the moment, and we heard it. Again, the other microphone may have picked it up a little clearer, where we hear it's sort of a whimpering voice of his own. I told him not to put his hands on me. Him, in the singular, Austin Metcalf, not a group of individuals who were threatening him.
Yeah, that was something that the prosecution, I believe it was closing arguments, somewhere towards the end of the trials when they brought that up. And they really, doubled down on that, which, as I'm watching the video, I didn't even, I'm listening and taking everything in. I didn't even pick up on it. I was like, oh, that's huge. That's a big point. That's a huge point.
Yeah. And if you do it in the closing arguments and you're the prosecutor, you can do it at a time when they can't respond to it. Like, you always want to keep a little something in your back pocket for that closing argument. I'm going to make an argument that maybe, no one else has made during the course of this case, and they won't be able to respond because they had their chance already.
They brought it out in closing arguments, the last thing the jury would hear before deliberating. The moment when the defense had already used its final opportunity to speak. A detail that small, deployed that late, with no ability to counter it. The jury convicted. Carmelo Anthony was found guilty of murder.
All right, folks, it's not the trial, but it's a start. It's at least a start of some level of transparency from this courthouse, from this judge, so the public can try to better understand why Carmelo Anthony was convicted of murder.
Here is what this case teaches, and it is something worth carrying out of this courtroom and into your own life. You do not have to be dishonest to say things that hurt you. You do not have to be reckless or stupid. You can be a frightened 17-year-old who just experienced something traumatic, who is standing in handcuffs on a running track while someone you know is being worked on by medics 40 yards away. And you can say 4 words, honest words, perhaps true words about what you believed you did and why. And those 4 words can travel into a courtroom a year later and do more damage to your case than almost any other piece of evidence presented. The Miranda warning exists for a reason. The right to remain silent exists for a reason. Not because the innocent have something to hide, but because the gap between what happened and what a jury will ultimately understand about what happened is often navigated in the silence that follows an arrest. Attorneys exist to help you manage that gap. They cannot help you manage words you have already spoken. What Carmelo Anthony said on that track was not a lie. It may have been entirely true, but truth, spoken without counsel, without context, without the arc